Notre Dame dismantled Florida State from start to finish on their way to a 52-3 win over the Seminoles, and you will be hard-pressed to find any team in the entire country that is playing as well as the Irish are right now. That's all coming right up.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, and welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports, and thanks for joining me here on a special Sunday afternoon edition of Locked On Irish to react to Notre Dame's thorough domination of Florida State. Quick reminder, though, before we get rolling here, please subscribe on YouTube or your preferred podcast platform. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, there's a bunch of different angles I want to get into after Notre Dame's 52-3 win over Florida State. We're obviously going to talk about what this win means for the pursuit of the college football playoff, but I want to focus on what the Irish showed in all three phases of the game first, because the defense was dominant once again. Special teams was actually a big factor in a positive way, despite an ugly missed field goal, and the offense took another step in the right direction. And I think when you look at how the Irish played in all three phases and how they've been playing over the course of the past month or so, this team looks like a real contender. I'm not suggesting that they're capable of winning a national championship just yet. They need to play this well against some really good teams before I'm able to get that far, but I think they certainly look like a team that is capable of making a run in the college football playoff. The offense was not perfect, but it was another step in the right direction coming off the bye week. I thought Riley Leonard had another good game. He finished 14 of 27 passing for 215 yards, had a touchdown to Mitchell Evans, and he also had 0 interceptions. But 4 of those incompletions were drops, so it really should have been 18 of 27 for around 250-plus passing yards. And his touchdown run to start the game was literally one of the best runs I have ever seen by a Notre Dame quarterback. And I think we as a fan base need to accept the fact that Riley Leonard is a good college quarterback. It's not a crazy take, and I know I'm being a little bit sarcastic there when I say it because I thought, he was a good player. Really, he's been a good player all year, but he's not a perfect quarterback. Like, I'm not trying to convince you that he's an elite guy or that he certainly doesn't need to improve, because he does need to improve as a passer. And if you're a Riley Leonard detractor, and there are a lot of you out there, you're going to point to the ball that he absolutely airmailed to Jordan Faison in the end zone. That was ugly. He missed Bo Collins on the sideline. Like, there were certainly some throws that he could have made that he did not make in this game. That's fine. He's not perfect. I'm not here to tell you that he's great. But look around college football. How many truly great quarterbacks are there in the league right now? Cam Ward is really good. He didn't have a great game against Georgia Tech. Had the fumble that really cost him the game there at the end. Quinn Ewers has had his moments, but he hasn't really been that great since his injury. Dylan Gabriel has been a really good quarterback for Oregon. He's still flawed as well. So I think there are really good quarterbacks out there in college football that are better than Riley Leonard, but you could nitpick every single one of their games as well. And I think Riley Leonard has improved to the point where he's certainly good enough as a passer. He can make throws when he needs to. He made some really nice plays through the air in this one, and he also gets the ball to his playmakers, but he is so dynamic as a runner that he is really, really difficult for defenses to defend. And I actually think we haven't even seen him run nearly as much as we could, especially lately, because they've been playing bad teams and they're just blowing them out. So they're really not using him as much in the designed run game. I think they called 2 designed runs for him in the game against Florida State, but he's so effective as a scrambler as well that, it doesn't really matter. You don't have to call those plays for him, and I think he's gotten a lot better at running when he should and staying in the pocket when he needs to. And sure, there's a couple plays here and there where maybe he could stay in the pocket a little bit longer, but again, he isn't perfect, but he is a good quarterback, and I think when you consider just the criticism that he receives from the fan base, it doesn't really make sense anymore, because he's doing exactly what he's supposed to do. He runs when he needs to, and he makes plays with his legs, and he makes throws that he needs to as well. He's being held to an impossibly high standard by some people, and I'm not really sure why. Maybe it's because of the fact he's a one-year rental, and maybe people just don't like the fact that Notre Dame continues to add transfer quarterbacks, and maybe it's the NIL thing. I'm not really sure. Maybe they just haven't gotten over the loss to Northern Illinois, and if you've been listening to the show all season long, you know that I think he should not have been in there in the second half against Northern Illinois, and that cost them the game. But since that game, and really specifically since the bye week, I think he has been much better, and what this Notre Dame offense has right now is really, really good, and a big reason why is because of Riley Leonard. It wasn't just him, though. The Irish finished with 201 rushing yards, despite a pretty off night from Jeremiah Love. He had 9 carries for 19 yards, but Jadarian Price, it was the best game of any running back of the day. He had a really nice touchdown run, and when he hits the hole, man, he's just a different back. It was a big criticism of him early on in the year, how he tried to bounce everything outside, and sometimes when he does get that angle outside, he can make some plays there, but he's not just forcing that every single time. So great game by him. They were efficient on the money downs. They finished 5 of 12 on third downs, 2 of 2 on fourth down conversions. So that's really good. And there were 2 performances that stand out for the receivers and tight ends. I think it's Jaden Greathouse and Mitchell Evans. Big game for Greathouse. One of his best of the year so far. 5 receptions, 66 yards, led the way for all of Notre Dame's receiving targets. He had some great plays on the screen passes too. I think it's a little bit underrated how good he is with the ball in his hand. I still can't really get over the fact that he got hawked in that game against Navy, but he had a couple nice plays on the screen passes where he set up extra yards for himself, including one nice play on third down. Great setup by Mike Denbrock as well. He also drew a pass interference penalty down the field. Also, one of his best catches of the season when he had a Florida State defender draped all over him. Really good catch there that set up a touchdown. And then Mitchell Evans, that is the Mitchell Evans that we're used to seeing. He only finished with 2 catches for 21 yards and a touchdown, but he had a really, really nice play that was unfortunately ruled incomplete because the ball just barely touched the ground. But it's the best he's looked all season, in my opinion, and that's a really good thing for this offense because they have needed more production out of that tight end room, which seems crazy for any Notre Dame offense, but that's really been the case. And now that he's more than a full year removed from his torn ACL, that's the player we expected to see in the preseason. Jaden Harrison had a couple nice catches for 47 yards. I think with him being a little bit more involved in the offense, that's certainly encouraging because it wasn't the best game for Jordan Faison. He did have a bad drop, but he was able to make up for that with a nice catch on fourth down for a 22-yard gain. So Notre Dame doesn't really have a true alpha at wide receiver. Bo Collins has played the best of any Notre Dame wide receiver all season long, but this is something that we talked about before the season started. There's a bunch of talent in that room, and even though it took a while for that to really show itself, and again, part of that was on the play of Riley Leonard at the beginning of the season, now we're starting to see that every Saturday because you don't really know which wide receiver is going to have the best game. This week it was Jaden Greathouse, and then after a couple quiet weeks for Jaden Harrison, he stepped up and had a nice game, and that's a really good place for this offense to be. And I thought the offensive line played pretty well as well. The tight ends contributed in the run game as well. Jadarian Price, his touchdown run was set up by a nice block there on the outside by Evans. Raridan was getting in there on the action, which is good to see because he hasn't always been that effective as a run blocker, but I think he was in this game. And then Mike Denbrock set up some really nice plays as well. I thought that pass to Aeneas Williams on that first drive of the game that set up the touchdown was a really, really good play design. Aeneas Williams did not have a man on him, and they motioned a guy over, realized that flat was going to be open. It was a nice, easy play for Riley Leonard to pass to him. That sets up a big gain on third down there. So I just really like what I'm seeing from this offense. And yes, they are not perfect. There are certainly some plays where you're like, man, I wish they could have made that play. There was that one drive there when Notre Dame was going in to score, and then they ended up settling for a field goal. Riley Leonard forced a throw in the middle of the field that wasn't really there. There are still steps for this offense that they need to take, but I just think when you look at what this team has done, and specifically on offense, how they have improved so much from the start of the season, they are really clicking right now. They scored 45 points in this one, got some help from Luke Talich on an interception return for a touchdown, but they don't need to score 40 points in every single game, but that's what they've been doing lately. They are just really clicking, and I really think that as they continue to progress the rest of the way, they have 3 more games left. None of the defense that they're going to face, except for Army. Army does have a good defense. If they can just continue to improve, they are going to be in a really, really good spot as the season ends. And a big reason why is the play of the quarterback. I really feel like what Riley Leonard has done to this point, he's just done what he's supposed to do. He's made the plays he needs to make, and he is just a nightmare for opposing defenses. And I think that we put so much emphasis as a fan base on the plays that he doesn't make that we forget to acknowledge the plays that he does make, like that 44-yard touchdown run, like some of the other passes that he made throughout the game, including a really nice ball to Mitchell Evans there for a touchdown. I think as more fans start to just kind of look at what he's done and what he continues to do every single Saturday, they're going to be more appreciative of what this offense can achieve. And I think that as they try to finish out the rest of the season, this looks like a college football playoff offense. Not a championship level offense yet, but they do have a championship level defense, and they have played that way all season long, and they reached another level on Saturday after suffering another critical injury. Hopefully, this injury to Howard Cross isn't going to affect them long term, but still, really, really impressive performance by them. More on that right after this. Today's episode is presented by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Here's my pick. We got Monday Night Football tonight. The Miami Dolphins are in LA to take on the Los Angeles Rams, and I am taking the Rams -2.5. That's what you can get it at on FanDuel right now. Some weird action with this line. It was at -2.5 last week, then it came all the way down to -1, and now it's back at -2.5. I don't really know what to make of it, but I'm going to take the Rams to cover, and you can do that on FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Notre Dame played a football game on Saturday, which means that Al Golden's defense had another dominant performance, and they did it in such predictable fashion. They did give up a long drive to start the game. It was a 16-play drive for Florida State that ended with a field goal, and then the Notre Dame defense just locked it down the rest of the way. It's actually kind of funny how predictable it is at this point. I remember after Florida State scored on that opening drive, I was like, well, that's going to be the only points that they score today, and that's exactly what happened. And I thought this was an especially impressive performance because they did it without Howard Cross for the majority of the game. Freeman called it an ankle sprain for Cross. He said that there was a chance that he could have come back in at the end of the game. I don't know why he said that. That's just so obviously not true. Even if that was a close game, I just don't think there was any way Howard Cross was coming back on the field. He had his ankle wrapped up in a brace, and then that brace was wrapped up in a bunch of tape. So it was pretty much completely immobile, but he was able to at least walk off the field on his own power, and I don't think that's the last we'll see of Howard Cross this season. I don't expect to see him against Virginia. I don't expect him to play against Army, but he could be back for USC, but I think worst case scenario, he's back for the postseason, hopefully, if Notre Dame is able to finish this thing out 11-1. But this Notre Dame defense finished with 8 sacks and 10 tackles for loss, again, without their best defensive lineman. The 8 sacks was a season high for Notre Dame and the most given up by Florida State all season long. And this isn't a huge shock, right? When I did my game preview, I mentioned how they were bottom 5 in 8 major statistical categories on offense. Like, this is just an abysmal unit, an abysmal team. But still, for Notre Dame to go out and perform like that without one of their best players is just really encouraging because, you know, on that opening drive, Florida State was running the ball a little bit, and you're like, wait, what's going on here? This is one of the worst rushing offenses in the entire country. But then they just figure it out after that first drive. I'm not really sure how it works, like how Al Golden just sees it all and then just masters everything and then just completely shuts them down the rest of the way. But this was a huge game for Riley Mills. Had 3 sacks in this one, and 2 of them came right after Howard Cross went off the field. And I remember just thinking, man, that sucks, seeing Cross go down, and it looked like he was in a lot of pain. And then Riley Mills just, boom, sack, and then follows it up with another sack right after that. Added another one late in the game, had a couple other pressures that did not result in a sack, but ended up being good plays for the Notre Dame defense later on in this game. And then Donovan Heinisch had a really nice game as well, coming in for relief of Howard Cross. He had 2 sacks. There were some plays that he could have made in the run game, but look, I think that's just the Donovan Heinisch experience. He's a little bit undersized, but I think he is just a dog out there on the field, much like his older brother, Kurt. So great for him to come in that spot and then deliver. Jalen Sneed had a nice sack as well. Sneed has been really productive as of late in limited action. Like, he was only on the field for 19 plays, but he was making plays all over the field because it wasn't just his play when he got the sack in the backfield. He had a nice play in coverage where he was basically accounting for 2 guys in the flat, and Florida State was not able to convert the pass, and Sneed was a big reason why there. So credit to him for not letting his lack of playing time really get to him, because when he's out there, he's making plays. And I really hope that he continues to thrive in this role for this Notre Dame defense, because they need him. They need all the playmakers they have, and there's a bunch of them on this defense, including another guy who I never really expected would be in this spot at this point this season, and that's junior Tui Alamaka. He had a sack in this one, had 3 total tackles, had a run stop. He is just a productive player. And I thought, when he came in for Botello and Traore after they got hurt early on in the season, when they went out for season-ending injuries, junior Tui Alamaka came in and was making some plays early on, and I was like, okay, this is good. Let's see if he can keep this up the rest of the way. And to this point, he has. So that's really encouraging for this defense. Jaden Osbury and Bryce Young combined for a sack as well. So you're seeing production from a bunch of different faces on this front seven, and they did it without the leader of that group. Again, important to monitor that injury for Howard Cross. I don't think it's going to be season ending, but still, guys keep going down on this defense, and then the guys behind him keep stepping up, and that just shows you how deep this unit is at all three levels. And then you look at what Notre Dame was able to do in the secondary. They held Florida State to just 88 passing yards. They had 208 yards total in this game. Florida State finished 3 of 17 on third down and 1 of 2 on fourth down. They converted a few early on, and that was it for that Florida State offense. They also forced 2 turnovers in this game. Jordan Clark had a really nice interception there, just read it perfectly, jumped the route, and got a pick. And good for him, man, because he dropped an interception against Georgia Tech early on this season, and he also had that play early on in the game where the ball was tipped, and if Jordan Clark had just seen the ball in the air, he's probably catching that and returning it for 6 as well. So good for him to finally get one with the Irish. And then Luke Talich, great pick 6 late in the game. It was meaningless for the actual outcome, but just think about how big of a moment it is for him in that spot. If you haven't heard his story, he had Power 5 offers coming out of high school, but elected to come to Notre Dame as a preferred walk-on, basically bet on himself because he knew he would eventually earn a scholarship. He did with his performance as a true freshman, and then in pretty limited action on Saturday, he actually came up big, gets that pick 6, and just a great moment for him. And you could see on the sideline how hyped that Notre Dame's that entire Notre Dame team got for him. So that was great. And Ja'Kai Douglas, wide receiver for Florida State, he's a good player. He's someone I talked about in the game preview. It was if there's any guy on the outside that could potentially cause some harm to Notre Dame, it's him. He was out there for 38 snaps. He did not even register a single catch. So great game by the Notre Dame secondary all the way around. Christian Gray had some nice plays out there. And the longest pass that this defense allowed all game was a 15-yarder to a running back. This is an elite defense. I would put them against any single defense in the entire country. There is an argument to be made that even without Benjamin Morrison, arguably the best player on the entire team, a potential first-round draft pick at cornerback that Notre Dame does not have the rest of the way because of a hip injury, they still might have the best defense in the country. I don't know if it's the best, but they have a case. I think Georgia's a little bit more dominant on the defensive line, but look at what Ole Miss did to them this weekend. Ohio State has a really good defense, but Oregon kind of smoked them too. So most defenses have a bad game. This Notre Dame defense has not all season long, and even in the loss to Northern Illinois, that really wasn't the defense's fault. The only touchdown that they allowed all game was what I have called the luckiest play I've ever seen inside of Notre Dame Stadium. So they just continue to dominate. According to Pete Sampson, they are second in pass efficiency in the country, 4th in yards per play, 4th in third down conversions, and 7th in turnovers gained. They are allowing just 11 points per game. I really feel like I'm running out of words to describe how good this defense is, and they just continue to dominate week in and week out. And yeah, sure, Florida State is terrible on offense, and most of the teams that they have played as of late are pretty bad on offense. But Georgia Tech, they just had an offensive performance that beat Miami, who was the number 4 team in the country. Notre Dame's defense shut them down all game long, and they continue to do it week in and week out. And there's just so many things that when you're watching this team play, it's easy to take this defense for granted, and all season long I've been do not take this defense for granted because they are such a special group, and what they are able to do as they continue to lose players is just not normal. But we've just kind of come to the point now where we accept it because it's what we're used to, right? We're seeing it every single week, but do not take it for granted. I'm not even going to be nitpicky and ask them to figure out the issues on the first drive because it's clearly working. So allowing the other team to get down the field, once Notre Dame gets down there in the red zone, they're able to tighten it up and then hold Florida State to 3 points. I don't understand how it works out that way every single week. I understand that Florida State and all these other teams, they have their 15 script plays to start the game and they find something on tape, but it's just so impressive that Al Golden is able to see it, read it, adjust, and then shut them down the rest of the game. And they were able to do that again on Saturday against a really bad Florida State offense. The offense continues to improve. The defense just stays where they're at, really, and that is at the very top of college football. They continue to dominate every single week. So when you have a championship-level defense in a dynamic offense that is only getting better every single week, it begs the question, how far can this team go? That's next on Locked On Irish. Today's episode is also brought to you by Gametime. Whether it be sports, concerts, comedy shows, you name it, I love going to live events. And Gametime is a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And right before I started taping this episode, I actually bought tickets to go see the Lakers tonight. All thanks to Gametime. My favorite thing about the app, though, is you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and then you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. What time is it? Gametime. I've been pretty critical of Notre Dame's special teams unit all season long. I think that's pretty fair. They had a really, really rough start to the beginning of the season, but they were a factor in this one against Florida State. They were basically all over the Florida State punter every single time he went back there to kick. They got their hand on a couple balls, not like a true punt block in the way that it was like knocked down behind the line of scrimmage, but they affected the game in a major way. And that was a big step for this Notre Dame special teams unit because, like I said, it had been holding this team back, but now they're becoming a weapon. It's not necessarily like the Brian Mason punt block where you could basically count on that to happen every single game, but they're starting to make their presence felt in these games in a positive way. It was a big factor in the Georgia Tech game a few weeks ago, and clearly Marty Biaggi saw something on tape and he knew that they were going to have a chance to impact the game in this way, and I think that's important because finally every single phase of this Notre Dame team is clicking. The defense has been dominant all season long. Special teams has been up and down. The offense started off slow, but they've been improving every single week. And now you have a team that is clicking in the middle of November. They only have one loss. I still think they control their own destiny, not necessarily in terms of seeding, because a lot of other things are going to happen here that are going to impact Notre Dame's chances to not only make the college football playoff, but just where they land in those rankings. But they are doing exactly what they are supposed to do. They are destroying teams. This is Notre Dame's margin of victory ever since that loss to Northern Illinois. They won by 59 points over Purdue. They won by 25 points over Miami, Ohio, 7 against Louisville, but honestly, it should have been more, and also that's a ranked Louisville team. They won by 42 against Stanford, 18 against Georgia Tech on the road, who, again, just beat the number 4 team in the country. They won by 37 against a ranked Navy team, and now 49 over Florida State. Is that a gauntlet? No, but it is an average of 33.86 points per game, and that is something. In 6 out of Notre Dame's last 7 wins, they have delivered the worst defeat of the season to their opponent. They are destroying teams, and this stuff matters in the college football playoff. So, sure, Notre Dame isn't playing a particularly difficult schedule here to end the year, but they are doing exactly what they're supposed to do by destroying every single team who comes in their way, and that stuff matters to the College Football Playoff Committee. That is why I took issue with Todd Blackledge, the color commentator in this game, who, by the way, I got it wrong in the game preview. I said it was Dan Hicks and Jason Garrett on the call. No, it was actually NBC's A-Team with Todd Blackledge and Noah Eagle. And Blackledge was, publicly wondering why Marcus Freeman and the Notre Dame team were electing to pass the ball with Steve Angeli when they were up big on Florida State. Notre Dame signed up for 60, as Scott Van Pelt likes to say. Notre Dame was not doing anything crazy. They were just playing football from start to finish, and they just thoroughly waxed Florida State. It's not their fault that Florida State can't stop them. And it's like Steve Angeli threw for 3 passes for 37 yards. Like, what was he supposed to do? Just kneel it out the rest of the way? And look at the reaction on the sideline when Deion Colzie scored that touchdown. My good friend Jack Walsh, a certified ball knower, if I've ever seen one, pointed that out in a text, and he's exactly right. That sideline got absolutely hyped when Deion Colzie scored that touchdown. I think that shows you the type of character he has. Whenever the team gets that excited for a player, I think that tells you all you need to know about how they feel about that guy, and clearly they think very highly of Deion Colzie because that was a really special moment. The sideline went absolutely nuts, and it's like these guys who aren't really playing a lot on Saturdays. They work their ass off every single day in practice, and they deserve their time to shine on Saturdays when the opportunity presents itself, and it's not their fault that Florida State can't stop them. So, was Luke Tauch supposed to run out of bounds when he was returning that interception? That's a once-in-a-lifetime moment for him. Like I said, a former walk-on who bet on himself, and now he gets to experience this awesome moment on Saturday. And yeah, sure, Notre Dame gets to put more points up on the board, but that's not their fault. And again, this stuff matters in terms of the college football playoff. I put this out on Twitter on Sunday. Indiana is undefeated against a very weak schedule. I think it's outside the top 100 nationally, but they do deserve credit because they have been destroying every team they play up until this Michigan game this past weekend, where that actually got a little bit closer. That is a bad Michigan team who literally cannot throw a forward pass in 2024, which is insane, especially considering they just won the national championship. But anyway, Indiana, for the most part, has dominated every single team that they have faced. Since week 2, Notre Dame has done the exact same thing. They are destroying teams. And yes, I understand that NIU loss isn't going away anytime soon. And anytime you bring up Notre Dame's playoff resume, that NIU loss is a big stain. I'm not saying that this just wipes that away. But I also think you have to recognize that, yeah, Notre Dame has played a weak schedule for the most part, but they have destroyed everyone. I think it's even more frustrating now when you think back to that Louisville game, because Notre Dame was up 21-7 in the first quarter. Like, they really could have ran away with that one. They didn't. They even let up a touchdown late that made it seem like it was closer than it really was. But you were watching that game. You know that Notre Dame handled their business, and they should have won that game by a lot more. So every time they go out there and play, they are the better team, and they leave no doubt at all. And that's exactly what they're supposed to do. And I think that now when the committee is looking at Notre Dame, like, this is a primetime spot for Notre Dame. Maybe a couple of people on that committee, they realize that, hey, this Alabama-LSU game is over. Maybe they turn their attention over to see what Notre Dame was doing to Florida State. And I think anyone who was watching that game was thoroughly impressed by Notre Dame, despite the fact that we all know that this Florida State team is terrible. And man, they are terrible. Like, it's shocking to see how far they have fallen off. But Notre Dame handled their business, and this is a thing that we have been talking about since the beginning of the season. How are they going to be able to handle success after that loss to Northern Illinois? Like, there have been different games where you thought maybe this could be a letdown spot. I thought, coming off a bye, when you look at Florida State's record, maybe the team could fall off here, and they didn't. Riley Mills talked about how Dylan McCullough, the running backs coach, early on in the week, really stressed to the team that this is a rivalry game. And even though Florida State is a terrible record, like, there's some history there, there's some bad blood and all this stuff, and they needed to come ready to go, and they did. So it's a saying you often hear that, like, good teams are led by coaches, great teams are led by players, and I finally feel like this Notre Dame team is at a point now where they are led by the leaders of this team, and these leaders are keeping them on track after that loss to Northern Illinois, and they come out, they dominate, and they move on to the next game. They still have to do it 3 more times, but style points matter, whether you want to admit it or whether or not you like it. I think it's true, and this is a really good football team, and it's clear. Like, it's not like at the beginning of the season, like in that game against Miami, Ohio, where they were just like, they were winning and they won by a significant margin, but it didn't really feel that great because it didn't look that great. Like, no, that's not happening for this Notre Dame team, and it looks great. It's fun. It's fun to watch this Notre Dame team, and there was a point early on in the year where I was like, man, is this going to be a fun season? Because I had so much hope and expectations before the year started, and then had a really turbulent start there in week 2. But then ever since then, man, just watching this team get better every single week and improve and have fun doing it and just kicking ass and taking names, like, that is really fun to experience as a fan. And I wasn't sure we were going to be able to experience this, but we are. It's a whole lot of fun. Again, 3 more games left in the regular season. You got Virginia on senior day at home. You've got Army in the Shamrock Series game at Yankee Stadium, and then you got USC out here in California. I don't care what USC's record is. I am nervous about that game because every time Notre Dame comes out here, it's never easy. It's always like pulling teeth, even when USC is far overmatched from a talent perspective against Notre Dame. So they still have 3 games to go. I think that they need to dominate every single game left on their schedule. If they do that, they will leave no doubt. They will absolutely be in the college football playoff, and I think that they will have another chance to play a home game inside Notre Dame Stadium. Wouldn't that be fun, right? Like, after everything that we've talked about, everything that this team has been through since the beginning of the season, if they get the opportunity to host a playoff game, they are going to have a real good chance of winning that game and then actually doing some damage in the college football playoff, despite everything that has happened to this team throughout the season. And there's a bunch of credit to go around for that, but we are going to hold off to give that credit until the time has come. Right now, they just need to focus on beating Virginia, beating them decisively, and then moving on and then doing it again and again. It's a lot of fun, man. I'm having a lot of fun doing this, and I'm glad that you joined me here today on this Sunday afternoon show. But that is going to do it for this episode. I'm going to be back on Tuesday alongside Luke Smith to go over our final thoughts on the win over Florida State. We're going to break down everything we liked and didn't like from this one, and I know he's got some strong takes about the light show, so you are going to want to tune in for that. Also, please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to podcasts. If you liked what you watched or heard today, remember, like this video below if you're watching on YouTube, or rate and review the podcast, and I will see you on Tuesday.